Hey there, Internet. My name's Luxander. Today is Transgender Day of Visibility, and there is a post going around about questions you can ask a trans person on TDOV, and so I asked for you all to tell me which of those questions you wanted me to answer over on the community page of this channel, and we're gonna go ahead and do that in celebration of TDOV. Thank you for joining. Yeah, real quick, this is the picture over here that I will be drawing my questions from. So the first question on this that you all wanted me to answer is number 2, how long have you known? I realized I was trans when I was about 14 or 15, so it's been a little bit over 10 years now. 4, how did you pick your name? I went through a process of looking at baby names and all that kind of stuff. What I ended up finally doing was taking a collection of words that I really liked the meaning in the words in English, and I plugged it into Google Translate so that it would just tell me what that word was in a couple of other languages that I really like to just see what happened. And what I ended up with was Luxander, which is actually technically lux means light. I did not know this about Latin at the time, so what I actually pulled it out of was the words fluxus and fluxa in Latin, which mean fluctuating, ephemeral, changing, that kind of thing. So I just decided to kick the F off the front of there, not realizing that made my name mean something else. Number 5, what's your favorite dinosaur? I'm gonna go with pterosaur, just because it's astounding how big they were, and yet they were still capable of flight. And also, they would absolutely fuck us up if they still existed, so that's always cute. Number 8 was, what do you feel like you missed out on most in your childhood if you transitioned later? It's funny that I realized I was trans when I was in my mid-teens, but I'm still very salty about the fact that I didn't know it earlier. In a lot of ways, I don't feel like my childhood would have been significantly different if I had been born AMAB. I was allowed to pursue my interests, I was really like a scientific-minded kid. Like, I wanted to know about archaeology, and I wanted to know about paleontology and marine biology. Like, I was really interested in those things, and no one stopped me from pursuing those interests. People would buy me, like, the Egyptology big book, you know what I mean? So I had those things, but I also would get lotion and body wash for Christmas from people who didn't know me and my family, whereas I think if I had been AMAB, I would have gotten, like, Lego and toys that have to do with spatial recognition and stuff. That is also partially just a result of me growing up in, like, partial poverty, that I didn't have access to the same kind of toys that a lot of other people do. So it's hard for me to gauge what would be different if I was AMAB. Although, like, I will say, I think that I have higher emotional intelligence than most AMAB people that I interact with on a regular basis. So in that regard, I'm pretty happy with my upbringing. A lot of other factors that have nothing to do with my gender would have been the same no matter what I had been born as, so I still would have had, like, a difficult relationship with my mother and all kinds of stuff like that. So there are things that I feel I missed out on, but also a lot of things that I feel would have been basically the same. You know, I'm gonna leave in all the stuff that I just said, but I could have just answered this very simply with, I would have watched Dragon Ball Z growing up instead of having to play catch up in my adulthood. Number 9, what has been your favorite part of transitioning so far? Probably my voice. The videos are still up on the channel if you want to go look at, like, what I sounded like at the very beginning of my transition. It's so different. I recently went back and watched one of the early videos, and I was like, oh my god, what? No. Which is actually, the clip of that is over on my Twitch if you're interested in looking at the clip of that. Number 12, how has transitioning changed your life? I mean, the most obvious thing about how transitioning has changed my life is that people treat me differently based on how they perceive me. People will more readily perceive me as, I don't know what this person is, and if I put effort into it, I can help that transform into oh, I guess this person is a guy. So I guess the main thing that has changed about my life is just how people treat me and perceive me. It has made some things a little bit easier, like I don't deal with sexual harassment in my life as much as I used to, which is a big positive. Number 14, what would have made it easier for you to come out? Pretty much, like, as soon as I realized what the problem was, I was like, oh, I'm in a transition now, like, without even necessarily, like, telling anyone. And I mean, in the sense that I was having my dad buy me Axe deodorant before I told him that I was trans. So, like, that's a social aspect of transitioning that I was like, I'm just going to do this without talking to anyone about it. I guess I didn't perceive it as difficult to come out. I just really wish that there had been more awareness of trans people and trans issues in general. I am way off center of the frame. So I didn't really find it difficult to come out. I just wish that I had known earlier so I could have come out earlier. Number 15, what has been the hardest part of your transition so far? When I was first on T, like 5 years ago when I first started and I was on it for 2 years, I was not in a place where I could get my levels checked regularly. So the difficult part for me in those especially the first 6 to 8 months, was that I just felt like things were happening really slowly. And at this time, I now understand that my dose of testosterone was probably too high, so my body was reverse engineering it back into estrogen. I assume, because my current dose is a lot lower and my current hormone levels are within average range for testosterone, what you would expect. So I think that my dose, the first time I was on it, was way too high. So the most difficult part of my transition was being on T and feeling like changes were not happening fast enough and people were still consistently misgendering me, like, constantly. So that was really difficult. Number 16, how do you know you're trans? I'm deeply uncomfortable with being perceived as my assigned gender. And then that made me think, oh, clearly I'm the opposite. And then I tried that out, and it also didn't work. Therefore, I'm trans. Like, therefore, I'm non-binary. I have extreme social dysphoria. And that's how I know. Other people might not have that dysphoria, and therefore it is harder for them to tell. But that is how I know that I'm trans. It's not a universal experience. Okay, good. Number 17, how does it feel to transition? Sort of depends on what you mean by that question. I assume that the question is intended to mean, like, how does it feel to start hormones and medically transition? Wow, I can't talk today. But also, social transition is part of your transition. I would say that in the early times, it feels really weird because you're just telling people, oh, here's a thing about me, and maybe you're dressing a little bit different. But when you're AFAB, dressing masculine doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's kind of annoying, actually. So I would definitely say it feels awkward at first. For me now, transitioning, overall it has felt freeing and sort of like aligning things together and a lessening of insecurity. There's definitely a point in people's transition, I think, where they're hyper-focused on what is changing and what is not. As I was talking about, like, my first 6 to 8 months on T, I was really hyper-focused on those things, and I think that it probably makes your emotional situation worse. It probably makes you feel worse during that time. The overall process, how does it feel to transition? It just feels like there was a thing that I had inside of me, almost like a secret protected thing, that through the process of transitioning, I'm taking that thing that's inside me and bringing it out so that other people can see it, so that when someone looks at me and they're like, I can't tell whether you're a guy or a girl, I can be like, same, buddy. Hard same. Thank you. I'm glad that we all feel the same. We're all on the same page about that now. Thank you. Cool. I didn't actually read these questions before I decided to answer them, so I kind of hate that this question is even on here, but I will answer it because someone asked me to answer it. Question 21 is, why not just be a feminine guy / masculine woman? Listen, okay? Because the way that people treat me is a significant part of my dysphoria. Why not just be those things? Because I tried both of them, and they both made me want to yeet myself off of a cliff to varying degrees. So I'm non-binary. Oh, I guess also, like, this question is like if you're assigned male, why can't you just be a feminine man instead of transitioning to be a woman? Like, because that doesn't work. For me, like, you know, whoever the hypothetical person is, like, because it doesn't work, because it makes me feel like shit, because I'm not that, because I'm, like, a trans woman would say, like, because I'm not a feminine guy, I'm a fucking woman, like, what do you want? You know, okay, I don't need to get angry. It's just a question that I think is kind of stupid, like, because I can't. Do you, like, every single trans person goes through, again, I'm getting all worked up. Every single trans person goes through a phase where they're questioning, oh, Like, do I really feel like this? Like, maybe, why can't I just be my assigned gender, but express myself a different way? We all try it. Every single fucking person. Okay, I'm making broad statements. Most of us, when we're trying to figure out what's going on, we go through a phase where we try that, to be a feminine guy or to be a masculine woman. And the answer of why you can't just be that is that you still hate existing during that process. Number 22, how do you think your life would be different if you had transitioned younger? This is a really tough and interesting question because for me and my life circumstances, I think that my life would be pretty fundamentally different right now if I had transitioned younger. And the reason I say that is because I'm partnered with a person who, when we were first dating, identified as a straight man. So my ability to be feminine is still part of how our relationship works. Number 23, what is the best part about being trans? This is definitely a video that I made. What are the best parts of being trans? There is an immediate sense of connection to other people who are trans with just if you're initially meeting someone, you just immediately are like, oh, okay, so there's some things that I don't have to explain to you. We can start off on a baseline where we already kind of get each other, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically going to be friends with every person who's trans. I have met trans people who I fucking hate. I would also say one of the best parts of being trans is that I have a personal experience of this is what it's like to live and be treated as a woman in society, and this is what it's like, to a lesser degree, to be treated as a man in society, and I feel like I can see through these gendered performances and expectations in a way that a lot of cis people wouldn't be able to. And one of the things particularly about being transmasculine is that I can, in my position where I sometimes have male privilege, I can use that to teach cis men how their behavior makes women feel. Like, because I have the personal experience of, like, people have been creepy towards me before, and this behavior that you're doing is exactly the same as this behavior that I've had before, and I really didn't feel good about it. So that's one of the best things about it. Number 25, how can I make things better for you? Didn't expect this question to be on here. Again, I did not screen them before I agreed to answer them. If you're cis, make a habit of introducing yourself with your pronouns. I know it's awkward, and I know it sucks, but I can't fix that. I can't fix the normalization of pronoun sharing. I think that it should be the norm to share your pronouns instead of being the norm to ask if you're unsure, because that just means that you're going to put a bunch of non-passing trans people or non-binary people in an uncomfortable situation where it's like, oh, thanks, glad to know that I look like a gender freak to you. Cool, good to know. So normalize sharing your pronouns when you're introducing yourself, or put them in your signature of your work email or whatever, that kind of stuff. Pronouns in bio on Twitter. Correct people when they misgender someone behind their back. So if you're having a conversation with another cis person, and the question is how to make things better for me, but this is like how you can make things better for trans people in general, or non-binary people in general, either way. So correct people when they misgender us behind our back. Generally just push back against transphobia. When you find out that there's a bathroom bill in your state, contact your legislators about it. Advocate for people being able to easily change their documentation. Advocate for there being a non-binary option for people's identification. These are all things you can do to make the world better for non-binary people. Number 26, what are you most excited about in your transition? I'm kind of late in it. Like, I've had these things going on for a while, so I don't know that there's anything that I'm, like, excited about in my transition anymore, because the overwhelming majority of the changes have already happened. No, so here's the thing. I have chin hairs right now that are growing and developing. So I'm going to go ahead and say that chin hairs are the most exciting part of my transition right now. And number 28 is the last one. What do you wish you could tell younger you as a trans person? I mean, like, what version of a younger me as a trans person? Like, am I talking to the person who was me when I just figured out that I was trans? Or am I talking to the person that was younger before I knew that I was trans? If I were to talk to the younger me who didn't know that I was trans, I would say, like, hey, this is a thing that exists. You might, like, look into whatever possible resources there are about this. now and try to get an idea of like what you want out of this situation. That would also prevent me from coming out after someone else came out at my high school, and thus people telling me that I was a poser. Wow, deep invalidation of my identity from a young age. But if I were talking to the person who just figured out that they were trans, I would say, like, this is not the end of the world. You have a life ahead of you, and if you want to pursue transition, you should do that without getting tied up in how other people are going to feel about it. It's probably what I would tell a younger version of me who is trans. That is all the questions that I was asked by you to answer on this post, so thank you so much for your participation. I am now streaming on Twitch if you want to check out my Twitch, and I have also decided to make my Discord server public, so if you want to, you can find a link to that in the description below. And the usual, check me out on Patreon, PayPal, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe if you feel like it, and I hope you have an okay day. Bye! Thank you as always to the wonderful patrons who support my work, especially The Gay Agenda, Tina M., R. Halverson, Ela Stewart, Alex Maskell, Sarah A., Gretchen Becker, Wellington Marcus, Amanda B., Athiette, Elizabeth Bartell, Pinesnake, and Mr. Atheist.